Okay, welcome back to the School of Calisthenics. Tim, Jack and we have a special guest, Ross Edgley, with us. And before we sit down to eat a massive rack of ribs, courtesy of, I guess, today's podcast, our first ever podcast sponsor, Athlete.
They don't know.
Yeah, they don't know.
But they've given us such a good product. We've attributed and dedicated our podcast this evening and YouTube Q&A to Athlete. So we'll put some details up for them because they've hooked us up. If you look, we'll post some photos because there's a significant amount of beef which is going to get eaten around this table in about an hour.
You killed a dinosaur. I don't even know what has ribs like that. I'm excited.
And now I'm sure every single person watching this will know exactly what Ross, some of the incredible things he's done, the journey he's been on as an athlete, adventurer, as you call yourself now.
Is there anybody else in the world who names themselves as an athlete adventurer? Is that patented copyright?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a bit weird.
I should trademark that.
Do you think I should?
I like it. Before this goes out.
Yeah, because it's weird, isn't it? There's kind of a hybrid. I'm not an adventurer. I always say that there's not going to be mountains named after me, but equally I'm not going to see be at the Olympics.
Challenge you and Bear Grylls have a fight.
I'd put money on him. He's a badass. He's got knife skills. I'd be like,
he's actually ex-special forces.
Exactly. What am I going to do with my Loughborough degree?
Sit on him.
But for the one person watching that might not know who Ross Edgley is, give us the fast version of your journey, particularly through fitness and whatnot, to get to this point.
Yeah, so real short, it was just kind of I used to sort of swim and play water polo internationally, but built like a hobbit. So at 5'9", my coach was like, Ross, you need to grow or find another sport.
So what sort of age were you when you were doing that?
So yeah, I was playing internationally in the men's squad at 16, and I'm still waiting for my growth spurt now.
And the call up.
Exactly.
Exactly. Your arms were that big when you were 16.
So I never got the call up, and I never grew. So I ended up studying sports science. So I just became very round and studied sports science at Loughborough University and kind of really became fascinated with how you could manipulate your physiology, kind of very similar to you guys, sports background, but then you wanted to look at the systematic strength and conditioning of the human body, like human optimization basically. And then I started doing that, but then I just kind of got a little bit bored with conventional sport. So then I ended up, as you guys know, ran a marathon, pulling a car, climbed a rope, the height of Everest, and then it keeps getting weirder every year. And then so last year, swam. I was going to swim from Martinique to St. Lucia, which is 40 kilometres, towing a 100-pound tree. The currents were so bad, and I couldn't find the beach, that I ended up swimming 100 kilometres with a 100-pound tree, and I still couldn't find the beach. But I found out a lot about the human body in the process. So that's kind of it, and that's why I always say athlete adventurer, because you're not just an adventurer, but you're also exploring your body. Does that sound a bit weird?
No.
Sounds a bit weird.
We do a lot of body exploration. We're the same sort of thing in terms of the calisthenics. Is what can I do? What have I got to do to be able to achieve that? You have a penchant for ridiculous endurance events. Jack and I less so. But I think it's the process of exploration, of understanding of actually I want to do something which I don't know if I can do, but I want to go through the process to understand how. And along that way you go, actually, not that it's not hard, but you just enjoy that. For me, I enjoy the problem solving nature of it.
Yeah.
And I think ours, we get quite geeky about lever lengths and weight distribution, that sort of stuff. I think yours is probably more around understanding the psychology and the conditioning component and some of the stuff that I've seen you talked about and you've done right back. Some of the things I'm quite interested in going back to the beginning is you've travelled to some quite interesting places, and how those sorts of things came about. You've spent time with some really interesting people, and a lot of that knowledge has kind of shaped how you think. So there's that side of stuff that I think is shapes you as an athlete adventurer, but then also I see you crawling across mud flats because you one, it makes good content, right? But two, you're doing that because you're exploring some of the most brutal ways in which you can develop mental toughness to then give you the skills that you need to go and achieve these incredible feats of
Yeah,
athleticism.
that's such a good point, because I think for so long sports science felt that your physiology was the limiting factor. So we'd look at you and go, right, let's take a marathon for instance. We'll be like, right, we are going to monitor what your potential marathon time will be. We'll look at lactic threshold, VO2, power to weight ratio, all of these sorts of things, running biomechanics, everything. Yeah. And at the end we'll go, right, okay, cool, Tim, you can run 3 hours, sub 2 hours, world record, you are physically capable, bang. But that was always looking at physiology. And then what I found really interesting, Tim Noakes in the central governor theory, but there's been a lot of research on it, was saying that fatigue is an emotionally driven state that basically gets you to kind of like pull the handbrake a little bit, because it's going, whoa, this is horrible, don't do yourself damage. And we'd have all experienced this. If you have run a marathon or, even like 10K or anything like that, you'll all know that there becomes a point where you're like, oh my God, I can't go on, this is horrible, this is absolutely killing me. But, when you get to the finish line and all of a sudden your family's there and, your kids cheering you on and exactly, all of a sudden, you are Usain Bolt, your biomechanics change, you are upright, your cadence, all of a sudden and it's like, well, where did that come from? And it's because your brain was telling you, whoa, hold up, and it was just, it's self-preservation. Your brain is telling your body, oh, this is horrible, don't go on. And what's amazing is I found when you look at people like Emil Zatopek, so widely considered to be the greatest endurance athlete ever, winning 2 gold medals, 1 Olympics, Helsinki I think it was, never ran a marathon before. So I think it was the 10,000 he'd already ran, and I do a terrible Czech accent, so I apologise for any of your Czech listeners, but he was like, he goes, look, it turns to Scottish, he goes, I want to run marathon, and they were like, but you've never run a marathon before. But he came from a military background, and he was just like, no, but I know how to run, and I know how to just like be comfortable in the hurt locker. And they were like, well, what do you propose to do? And he goes, show me who is going to win, and the favourite, and I will sit on his shoulder and I will overtake him at the end. It's simple. And they were just like, but you've never... Yeah, and they were like, alright, fine. And that's exactly what he did. It was a British guy, he sat on his shoulder, and it's amazing.
This British guy.
Oh, it was amazing. I forget his name now, it's going to annoy me, but the British guy, he's old now, and there was this video, and he was looking back, talking about Emil Zatopek, and he was very, very sort of English gentleman, and he said, he goes, I never forget, he goes, I was running, and I was, really struggling, and Emil Zatopek came up on my shoulder, and he said, he goes, I have never run marathon before. This is at the Olympic Games. Yeah. And he goes, so I don't know. He goes, is this good? Is it too slow? And the English guy goes, I thought you bugger. And, I'm going to stitch you up here. So he said, so I turned to him and I said, oh no, Emil, this is far too slow. They're going to catch us behind. And with that, Emil Zatopek turned to him and he goes, okay, no problem, I see you would finish. And he did, and Emil Zatopek went on and run and won it. But it was because of his military background, and Emil Zatopek was also known for pioneering interval training. So he used to run 100 400-metre sprints. Yeah, so when you next think about hill sprints and everything, think of Emil Zatopek and just taking it to that level. His wife was a renowned javelin thrower as well, and one of their favourite workouts that they used to do for fun, she would launch a javelin and he, like a dog, would run and go and catch it and hand it back to her. Yeah, that was for fun. He used to run in military boots. So like in terms of like biomechanics and understanding forefoot placement, heel striking, everything like that, he used to just run in military boots. So the one thing about Emil Zatopek, and I think this is one thing that I try and do, is he just understood how to hurt and be comfortable. And I think if you can do that, it doesn't matter what your sport, you trying to break a world record for a handstand, are you trying to hold the human flag for the longest time, are you running a marathon, are you doing an ultramarathon, are you doing an Ironman, doesn't matter. If you know how to hurt and just get comfortable being uncomfortable, you can potentially win at any sport.
There's a lot in that, like what we talk about redefining your impossible, like a lot of the things that you're trying to do, people will say is impossible and your body shouldn't be able to do it. And I'm still looking at your arms now going, how are they that big when all he does is like swim?
we work in swimming, and have done for quite a number of years, and I know the sets that the guys do, and they're not trying to swim the distances you're trying to swim, but I know a guy who was a 1500 metre swimmer, Graham Smith, who won a medal in Atlanta, and his total volume for a week would be sort of like maybe, I don't know, they were doing 10k, maybe pushing up towards 100. Like you're pushing volumes similar to what the guys would be to go and swim 1500 meters at the Olympics. And like our guys will maybe go and do a week, and they'll hit half the volume that you're training. But they're training for 400 meters. So you then start to argue about specificity and that sort of stuff. But still, like the amount of volume that you're able to pack in is impressive.
What was the first one? Was it the carpool? Was that the first?
It was. Yeah, and I think
what inspired that?
Well, essentially work capacity. So you know, within the book coming out 10th of May.
Have you got a copy?
Oh, so glad you asked. No, so within the book, we were talking about this earlier, that I do systematically identify laws that every athlete should do, and one is the law of more. So work capacity, your body's ability to perform and positively tolerate training of a given intensity and duration. And it doesn't matter if that is, you know, marathon training, powerlifting, it doesn't matter. It's just, you know, your body's ability to just go, yeah, you know, I can cope with that and positively adapt. You know, if we all, again, were training for an ultra marathon, a 100-mile ultra marathon, and we had a month to do it, and we all set off and ran a marathon tomorrow just to give us a good start, you know, some of us would just be on the sofa afterwards going, what was that? I'm in pieces. And other people would be like, I hurt, but I can recover and go again. And I think, this idea of work capacity and the law of more is just, you know, your body's ability to, you know, perform but positively tolerate it, but looking at ways to do that. It's not just about throwing stimuli at the body. And one thing that I've always found is with swimming, with the world's strongest marathon, it's looking at something of like work capacity and crazy volume, but it's actually a lot of concentric contractions. So if you think of swimming, for the lats, for the arm pull, it's all a concentric contraction. There's nothing eccentric. It's not like when you're running, if you're running downhill and your quads and your
ground
hamstrings.
reaction force or anything.
Exactly, and it's exactly the same with sled drags. You know, it's all concentric contractions, and pulling a car is just a very large sled drag. So after 26.2 miles of pulling a 1.4 ton car, everyone was like, oh, you must have been in pieces afterwards. And it was like, no, because it was all concentric contractions. And because I developed over those 10 weeks a way of training that I was absolutely fine.
You trained 10 weeks for that?
Yeah, and then the day after just ran a half marathon as well, just to sort of, out of my own curiosity,
just
was like,
I was
like, oh no, my legs still work. And I think it's the same with swimming, that yes, it is a lot of volume, and when people go, that's crazy, I'm like, yeah, but it would be very different if I was running it. You know, I'm sort of 95 kilos, built like a hobbit. If I'm running downhill, my legs, you know, just that eccentric contraction, the impact, you know, going through each foot, you put about 3 times your own body weight through each foot. So going downhill, it's just like, you know, on a big descent, that's like doing, you know, 200 eccentric squats. And that's a recipe for disaster. But with swimming, especially long distance, it's all aerobic. You know, I'm never out of breath. It's all concentric contractions. So looking at something like training for 3 hours and smashing, you know, sort of 15K, people go, whoa, that's crazy. I'm like, but when you actually look at the science of that 15K, low impact, non-weight bearing, concentric, all aerobic.
I've got a thing about swimming that I'm interested from a mindset perspective. Like I've never done a lot of swimming, and then when I started working with the Paralympic team, we were on training camps, and there's obviously 50 metre, there's a long course 50 metre swimming pools there, and I was like, I'm going to start swimming because I don't really know what these guys are going through, and I'm not conditioned for it at all. And what I found was I'm not really the right shape for swimming like you, but I'm just a smaller version, obviously. But like the elite swimmers that I see, they just don't have they don't have the same build. But I thought I'm going to give this a go, but I was so deconditioned for it that I was like, I would swim 25 metres and my lats and my shoulders were in bits, but I kind of pushed through it. My first set was like, I'm going to do 1,000 metres. That is like what I'm going to aim at. And that was like hard. And then I was training with a girl who actually done a lot. She used to be a very good swimmer. She likes to do a kick set. And I literally couldn't kick 25 metres because my hip flexors were in bits. But you start going, well actually, like I've never trained like that. My sports background was all field based, but you realise how badly conditioned you are for some of these sorts of tasks. But I got better at it. But I remember like I was slamming long course for the first time, 50 metres, and I was with one of the guys who was the head coach at the time, was an ex very high level international level swimmer, and I was like, I did long course today, and he goes, Because it's awful, isn't it? I was like, yeah, I got halfway and I was like, cracking. And then I told Cara, my wife, and I was like, I swam long course for the first time to get shot. Did you go to Tumbleton? I was like, you flipping kidding. Like, I had to have a rest when I got to the end. But it made me realise that, and I read at the same time I was reading a book by Chris McDonald, I think I've got the name right, called Natural Born Heroes, and it came up with this idea, and I wrote a blog about it, around hero training, and if I needed to swim for my life, could I? And I was like, no. Like, I would drown. Yeah. So having this base level of the sorts of things that you're able to do is like, you can do a triathlon, you can swim, you can pull a car. Like, I think that having that athletic ability and diversity in your training, and you can bench press however much, you've got strength training in there, is a thing that we can learn a lot from. I look at my training and go, I'm missing a massive part of it. And there's a number of different reasons. We can't do everything all the time because of circumstance. But I do think that you take it to the extreme. But what your general sort of person like, who's just involved in fitness, having that array or that foundation of different attributes, and that's something that which you cover in your book, about actually going back to first principles of fitness. Tell us a bit about it, because there's some amazing information in there. Like, what's the concept behind it, and what are you what's the big sort of message that you're trying to get across?
It's very similar, because I know we all we geek out when we all catch up over barbecue ribs. But it's basically, I was sitting there going, how could you systematically train the body, the human body? So I wanted to create almost like a user's guide for the body. It's like, you're given a body, how do you use it? And I know we were talking about this, Jacko, like so many people when they're in the gym, you know, they'll go in and they'll kind of go, oh yeah, I'm gonna do bicep curls. Oh no, I forgot to squat. Forgot to do my legs. Oh cool, you on the cross trainer? Yeah, I'll do a bit of cross training. Air bike, wee. And it's just like, on a cellular level, what signal are you trying to send your body to adapt to? This is all over the place. And so it was really to bring some clarity. A lot of what's in the book, I mean, human biology hasn't changed for thousands of years. We've known about this, you know, the laws of thermodynamics, when you start looking at your diet, you know, macronutrients, everything. It's all been there. But no one's ever put it into this framework, a cohesive framework. And so with this, I almost say it's like a literary buffet, in that, like, once you read it, you can go, I want to get strong. Brilliant, there's a whole chapter. Andy Bolton, the first guy to deadlift 1,000 pounds, helped me write that chapter. I want to get quick, you know, next month. You know, we were saying, have a clear direction. Cool. I documented everything that I learned from Linford Christie to Loughborough University and everything. You know, there is no better coach, really, than someone like Linford Christie. I want to learn about endurance. Brilliant. It documents all of my time with the Sam Bushman, where we were running in Africa over an ultramarathon a day, and then I came back as well and started to learn from a lot of fell runners like my friend James Appleton, who's world obstacle racing champion. So it's like you've taken like this melting pot of genius, which says, I know what we always get on, and that's what we throw around. I'm like, imagine if you could just create an athlete who understood body weight conditioning like you guys, endurance like the Sam Bushman, you know, and compile that all into a book. And for 10 years, like I said, it's taken me 10 years. I think it was Orwell who said, you know, how dare you sit down and write when you haven't stood up and lived. And so that's why people are like, why is it taking you 10 years? And I'm like, because that's, I mean, when I handed it in, it was 200,000 words, and they were like, this is ridiculous, we commissioned you for 70. And I was like, well, I've got a lot to say. You know, so we've had to completely, you know, sort of get it down and condense it into this framework. And this is certainly how I came to learn about you guys at the very start, that if you imagine a pyramid of priority, as I call them, so this hierarchical way to run your body. So it doesn't matter if your goal is strength, speed, stamina, there'll always be something at the base of your pyramid that you should start with. So we were talking about this because, you know, for those listening, and you've probably seen on videos, Tim possesses an unbelievable handstand push-up. It's just obscene. So to get strong, it's like, what must you do? But then you were saying that your military press, it felt a bit weird, it felt a bit different. So absolutely, in terms of that strength pyramid of priority, strength is a skill. People don't realise that. You have to drill the movement. There's no point putting loads of weight on the bar when you're just drilling bad biomechanics. If you've got good genetics and raw strength, you might be able to muscle your way through certain movements, but there will come a time when you just completely plateau. And it starts to look at then work capacity. So again, coming back to the fact that, okay, if we're designing a program for you and we say, right, you want to get good on deadlifts, cool, you know, 10 sets of 10, German volume training, and then all of a sudden your body's going, well, what was that? It's like, well, you didn't have the work capacity to tolerate tolerate that. And then we even covered that today when we were talking about there will be a point where neurologically you're recruiting all the muscle fibers. We'd all seen it, to put it in sort of simple terms, you know, those sort of quite lean, smaller guys who are insanely strong.
Climbers. I like that.
Exactly. Climbers is the best example. You know, neurologically they're recruiting all of their muscle fibers, you know, possible, and they are stupidly strong. And then they'll get, you know, some guys who are huge but not very strong in proportion to how big they are. And that's all around their strength deficit. And there becomes a point where if you are looking to get stronger, if you can honestly say, like, neurologically, I'm using my full potential of my muscles, then muscular hypertrophy is your sort of only other option. You need to get bigger. It's like almost like you need a bigger engine in your car. Just as simple as that. And again, I think what's nice about the book is it gets people to think outside of that. It's sort of, you know, hypertrophy is not a bad word. You know, boys, bodybuilding. Oh, I'm trying to get bigger so I can get stronger at, you know, body weight conditioning. That's all. It doesn't make me a bodybuilder. And we were just talking about this as well.
People like wanting labels. I mean, that's probably going to get a little bit too deep outside of fitness, like. But so people wanting to, like, we almost want a label, like I'm a bodybuilder, or I'm a calisthenics, or I'm a this, I'm a that. And now when I played rugby, I was like, I'm a rugby player. And it's like, well, what happens when that's taken away? And that's not what's the reason, what's the why behind your training, you're doing what you're doing. It was, you know, one of my first questions I feel like, why, like, these crazy things you're doing, like, why are you doing, like, what's the reason behind it? And it's the same question that the example you gave of someone in the gym going from one thing to the next thing, and then I was squatting that, like, they don't know, they have no why, they don't know where they're going. Like, what's the reason for it? I remember a guy had, it reminded me of being when I was at Loughborough at 2 training, and there was a guy who'd done like a massive chest bench session before the day before, and then he wanted to come to the gym with us, and he was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, they're doing chest as well." He's like, "Yeah, I'll do chest as well." It's just like day back to back. Just the why was like, the why was because my mates are doing that session. And I quite like bench. Not like I'm trying to. He was a rugby player. He was a Harlequins. Like, he should have been trying to improve himself physically for that purpose, but it was sort of lost. And I think a lot of us, we all go through that, and I think as a general sort of, if I'm just I'm not a professional athlete, I'm just like my training, and I know it's good for me to work out and stay fit and healthy. Like, having understanding why are you doing it and what are your sort of goals, and it's good to have goals. Like, that can really help sort of not just motivate you, but channel your energy and your time, and so you're being effective with your training.
But I think. You know, on the idea of actually, you know, being so easily influenced and jumping from one thing to the other, and understanding, like, you know, am I a bodybuilder, am I a sprinter, and stuff. And I think that's what's so nice about the book. It was so heavily influenced by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who one of my favourite quotes is, you know, if you teach a man principles, he can create his own methods. And I think there are so many methods out there, diet plans and workouts, that you are expected to blindly follow, like, you know, to use strength training, you know, German volume training, you know, 5x5, and, you know, these are all methods. They're great, but if you learn principles, so as we were talking about, let's stick with, you know, increasing muscle mass. So, you know, the 3 principles of increasing muscle mass, you know, hypertrophy, mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. If you learn those 3 principles, it doesn't matter about the workout, because you understand how to actually create your own.
I think we probably frustrate people sometimes, because we get a lot of questions, and when you come from an S&C background and you've developed programs, you've always got that goal at the end of sort of working towards something, and it's a season long, or for us it's actually 4 years long, is this cycle that we're prepping for. And people are like, should I do this exercise, or should I do that, or how should I go about training for a handstand? And we're like, well, it depends what you want. And there's so many times when you question, just go, well, the answer is, it depends.
And you feel bad because you want to give them a really simple answer.
I want to tell you,
but the truth is, like, it depends. And we can't hide that, even though it's frustrating to hear that, probably.
Yeah, it's exactly that. So again, you know, he was an economist, but one of my favourite authors, Nassim Taleb, you know, one of my favourite quotes of his was, you know, as humans facing limited knowledge always resort to prescribed ideas and narratives. And it's so true. He didn't mean that for fitness at all, but it's so true. As humans facing limited knowledge, so when we don't really understand how to train, how to diet, we resort to these prescribed ideas and narratives. So we just want to be told, oh, that's the workout I'm doing today. Yeah. But that's just not how it works. It's not optimal. It will be like a comfort blanket, and you'll go like, oh yeah, I'll just follow this diet. But you don't understand the principles, so it will come unstuck.
Don't you think that our access to information today, like technology and at our fingertips, and the prevalence of people's voices, but also the medium in which people have got, it's easy for people to communicate, has just completely clouded up. There would have been a time back in the day when we didn't have social media and the internet, where if you wanted to learn how to get bigger, you had to go to a library and get a book and read about it, or go and speak to somebody in the gym. And you didn't have, you might have gone to the biggest dude in the gym and gone, help me to get bigger, or the thinnest person, whatever you were training for, the best marathon runner. Tell me what you've done, and that person would take you under the wing. And to be fair, that was probably some of where the bro science started to come from. But actually, you were indoctrinated, or you were following one person's thought process, which actually probably yielded quite good results. But whereas now, you can follow, an unlimited number of different people's ideas, and people have interpreted fitness and their different, what their theories are around it. So all of a sudden, I think it's become a massively complicated thing, and that's what we've tried to do with our framework, is gone, these are the principles that you need to understand if you're going to learn any calisthenics movement. So you need to prepare for the session you're going to do, you've got to teach yourself the skill component, you've got to get specifically strong, and you've got to just build that engine of capacity strength. Doesn't matter if it's a pistol, squat or a muscle up, same principles. And then you've got to be, there's a little bit of art in that about which exercises you're going to use, and understanding what your body is currently able to do and where your weak links are. You made a comment before about my shoulders. I was actually reflecting on the way home a little bit about it, and I started to learn to handstand because I'd got a bad shoulder, and because it dislocated and I had surgery on it, and that was the reason was, if I could handstand, my shoulder's stable. The irony of that is, and I think it's probably, from a lot of cases, yours is probably similar, but you then turn that into your biggest strength. It's actually the thing that I'm best at calisthenics, which is actually started with the thing that I was weakest at when I began. And I just think that's probably aside from the point of the exposure that we've got to a massissive amount of information, and people get confused and they actually don't know what they're doing anymore. That's what I love about your book, is you've gone back to first principles of fitness.
Because it's not, these things aren't black and white, like there's more than one way to get strong, for example. And in the past, before the internet, and if it's before the internet, before social media, if you were going to read something that was published in paper, no one can just write what they want and it get passed by through to actually go into print. So there's been a consensus that this information is valid, and therefore it's been published in a research paper, for example. Whereas now I can write a blog and I can write whatever I want. It could be a load of tosh, but people might believe me, and it makes it more. It's already confusing without that, and then it just makes it so much more.
But there are countless examples of people that are putting out information like that, and they sound like they talk the talk, but when actually when you look at it, and we've benefited from a number of years in the game, and you've actually got some context to put that under. It looks convincing, but you dig into it, and you're like, I don't know, this is. I'm not sure, and we have to challenge ourselves and go, well, maybe you're seeing things differently, what can I learn from that? And you are constantly critiquing, as we do with research papers. But there are some things that and that's what as I go back to what I like what you've put in the book, is actually nobody in sports science is going to argue. And actually you've gone back and gone, these are the laws and the principles that we need to follow if you're going to create a physical adaptation with the level of understanding that we currently have about the human body. It's not to say that's not going to change and we can't tweak it, but those things that, like you say, have been around for a long time. They've been tried and tested by athletes in all different endeavours, sports, recreation, whatever. Stick to those, and the thing is, like, a lot of the extreme cases, like you're an extreme case of what you would do, but for 99% of people, actually we just need to follow some really simple, basic principles.
And they're all the same. That's what I find as well, that the laws that I've identified in the book have been around for thousands of years. So it doesn't matter if you want to take them to the extreme like me, so the law of more and work capacity, it will be exactly the same for a beginner. And we address that in the book. So I say, if you're a beginner, amazing. I was like, oh my God, I'd love to be a beginner again. Because can you remember, like every week you'd put on like muscle, like your bench would, your bench press would just go up like 5 kg. Your rate of improvement was this. And we say that, and then But again, pyramid of priority within the book, like to take strength as an example, as you move up, so you've learnt the skill, you have the work capacity, you have the adequate amount of muscle mass, and we start moving up, that's when you can start to look at bands, chains, looking at your rate of force development, and you can start to get real creative with this. But that's at the top of the priority. You can't do this until you've got the base of the pyramid set. And it's exactly the same with everything. But I love what you said there, Tim, and that's what I said about the book, that I want to create an army of experts, not followers, because you will be your own best expert. So looking at Eugene Sandow, the father of bodybuilding, if you've ever read any of his books, it's written in sort of ye old English, so it's kind of hard to follow and stuff. But what's amazing, and I've sat through so many pages of it, and that's covered in the book, but he believed in just self-empowerment. So I'm going to butcher it, but he talks about this one point where he says, I often asked, when thy best time to train, and, and when the moon sets in the sky. And he goes off on one, but basically saying, I'm often asked when the best time to train is. And then he starts going off on one, but he's intricately talking about hormones and the circadian rhythm and your body's 24-hour biological clock. Now your circadian rhythm, everything and physiological, everything like this, and how testosterone is higher in the morning, dips in the night. We all understand that now, but what Eugene Sandow was talking about, an 18th century strongman, the father of bodybuilding, was still true. It's exactly the same. We've just got nice terms now, and we'll apply it, and you can say it and sound really clever. But it doesn't mean that what Eugene was describing was exactly the same. Yeah. And what I love about the book, and what I encourage everybody to do, is Aristotle. He basically the term is an epistemocrat, and it's he wanted everybody to hold knowledge, including their own, in such kind of suspicion, so just question everything, be a critical thinker. And at the end of the book I say, question this book, question me, question yourself, question everyone, because that's the only way that you'll ask questions. I bet your best students are those who say, like, why why am I doing this? Because you go, but let me tell you why. And that's what I want from this book, that there are workouts in there's workouts for every single goal you could ever want to achieve. Lose fat, the recipes are amazing, to build muscle, develop speed, improve endurance. But the reality is, once you've read all 320 pages of it, you can actually write your own. And that's what I want people to do. I'm like, here is a workout, but please adapt it to your own biological individuality.
That's what we do all the time. We've always been fighting with and you see it with all the graduates, and we love them when they come through and they've learned the thing that they're working towards, the goal that they've set themselves, they're impossible. And the guides to take people through them, some people find it difficult that we haven't actually just gone, on day one you do this, and day two this, and three this, because it's just not realistic, because everyone's day one is different, and everyone progresses at a different rate. So trying to educate people to be able to understand, like you say, understand the why and what you're doing, and then be able to write your own program. I think some people think, I paid you to write it. But actually giving you the information to write yours program, this one and the next one, and for infinity, isn't that worth more than just having one that runs out in 6 weeks?
Because what happens on week number 7? That's what we always say. If you don't know, if you haven't got the ability to write your own training program, you haven't got the principles, you can't create your own methods, actually you then just become reliant. And I think that's part of the problem.
I understand why people
totally get it.
Get a bit frustrated by that.
But your tendency is then to jump around a little bit. And actually, I think if people took a little bit of time to read, and you've written it really well. Anybody could pick that up and read. You don't have to be a sports scientist to read the book.
Not just look at the pictures. Dyslexia day.
But if people took the time to educate themselves in a way which is easily accessible, you've still got the option to go around and go, which training modality do I like? I like your style, I like what you're trying to teach. It might be calisthenics, it might be bodybuilding, it might be powerlifting. But when you're in that, you're actually understanding the bigger picture of where that sits. There's one thing I just wanted to touch on about, he's talking back at 18th century, people talking about bodybuilding. I look back at the old circus strongmen, and we've seen some photos of calisthenics back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Those dudes were huge. We've seen pictures of these guys who are probably 15, 16, 17 stone, and the one guy doing a single arm handstand on top of his other mate who's about 18 stone. And the only reason he's on the bottom is because he's a stone lighter than the guy himself. But he's not a small dude. And we're just looking at it, we're going like, people got strong, people were functional, and yeah, because there's probably a much bigger context of that, but they arguably knew less, but did more with it.
Yeah.
Whereas we know loads,
Yeah.
and I think I overcomplicate my training sometimes. I don't train hard enough because I'm like, I'm doing this complicated thing, like, and I don't put enough work in sometimes to get, and then I go, I'm change. But actually, there's two basic principles do work. Train at intensity.
Challenged by that today, aren't you? After
I've
spending
done one set with Ross today, I'm like, I've wasted 10 years. Why am I not him bigger? Oh yeah, that's
And he's
right.
behind you, pulling you to a failure. When he said 5 more, we were just doing this drop set, and we were really Tim's face. Tim had squeezed out his last rep, and Ross went behind him and went, 5 more. And he heard us, what?
And then collapsed on the floor. At that point, I was doing handstands on. I was doing push-ups on my knees.
But you're so right, and that is again within the book, the law of progressive overload, and I detail that, and I wrote that entire chapter from the Royal Marines as well. That was just the one thing that the Royal Marines understand is stress and stimuli.
Yeah.
You know that you are only going to get fitter, stronger, quicker. It doesn't matter from stress and stimuli. 1936, Hans Selye, he coined that general adaptation syndrome, and it's just like it's going to be uncomfortable. And I think now, it's marketable to say it's easy, this isn't going to hurt, you can vibrate yourself fitter, take this pill, it's easy, stuff, and it's just like...
Get fitter in 30 seconds a day.
Exactly.
Go into the vibrate yourself. It's
Exactly. Is that a different podcast? Do you know what the Royal Marines is like? The PTIs, they are foremost experts at stress and stimuli, and it goes back to that. It just goes back to exactly that. That you can have all the knowledge in the world, but unless you apply it with, looking at again like Dorian Yates and his high intensity training. If you've ever seen some of his videos, you're like, oh, that's what it takes to grow muscle mass. It's the same. You look at some of the gymnasts we were talking about. Sam Oldham, a friend of mine. He's just. I remember when I was talking about the pommel horse, and I was like, oh, so how'd you get good at this? And he was just like, oh, when we were a kid, we would just get on there and they'd put our feet in a bucket, and then they'd just leave us for 20 minutes. I was like, 20 minutes? So when you talk about time under tension and stuff, it's like they would just leave you in a bucket, and they were like, yeah, just swinging. And it's like, what? Yeah. So for all of the intricacies of let's break down, it's like, no, put your feet in a bucket and spin.
Just spend a lot of time from a young age doing it.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Ross, I want to touch on one of the sections you put around bodyweight training in the book, because I'm interested how you see it fitting into the bigger picture. And there's particularly the bit that you talk about around mechanical energy. Just talk about mechanical energy and then how you see bodyweight training being a benefit around that concept and feeding into whatever else it is you want to do from there onwards.
Yeah, so looking again at this pyramid of priority, so if you're listening on the podcast, kind of imagine this pyramid, and you've got the 5 laws, and the very first law is the law of body basics. Calisthenics, body weight conditioning, and it doesn't matter what you want to train for, what sport you want to train for, where you are on your journey, it doesn't matter. You need to understand how to move your body weight before you even think about running a marathon, because running a marathon is a body weight exercise. If you want to go and shift the barbell, you want to be a power lifter, well, you better learn how to move your body before you move a barbell. It doesn't matter. You need to have this foundation, and this goes back to a Soviet Union training principle. Soviet Union sporting principles, one of the greatest sporting successful nations. Obviously, a few ergogenic aids and a few things.
There's getting revelations, hasn't there?
There has, and it would be wrong of me not to sort of point that out. But when you look at people like Verkhoshansky, who pioneered plyometrics and the depth jump, that was during the time. So the depth jump, for those people not familiar, Verkhoshansky understood that if you wanted to jump on do an ordinary box jump, or you were doing a long jump, that if you were to jump from another box, land and use that kinetic energy, so you land, your quadriceps, your hamstrings, everything bend, elastic energy, eccentric contraction, that the concentric contraction, so as you jump, is more powerful. He understood that during a time when all other athletes around the world at the Olympics were like touching their toes and doing jumping jacks, and that's how pioneering he was. And so going back to how the Soviet sort of sporting nation understood how to take an athlete and make them amazing, they understood what was general physical preparedness. So when you were a kid, you know, if I'm like a Soviet coach here and I've got, you know, a young Tim and a young Jacko standing in front of me, you know, fresh faced, 5 years old, goes, I want to be an Olympian, you know, and I'll be like, right, I don't know if you're going to be big, strong, I don't know if you're going to have like stupid strong shoulders or an amazing flag, I don't know, because you're just kids. So what I'm going to do is this idea of general physical preparedness. I'm going to get you to crawl, run, jump, pull-ups, you know, calisthenics, bodyweight conditioning. And what that's going to do is lay such a strong neurological foundation that you understand how to move your body, that later when we go, oh, hang on, you know, remember that kid Jacko, he's quite strong, you know, maybe stick him into rugby, but he has the neurological capacity, he understands how the work capacity as well, the law of more, everything with this work he understands, and he can then apply it to the law of specificity.
And I think when we were kids, like what we used to do is we can go out and play all day, and like just mess about, play football, swing on trees. You're doing that like via just exploring the world and just your little world as a kid, if you know what I mean, but
it's
just
exactly
naturally doing that.
It's exactly that.
That's being suppressed these days, and I don't know.
Well, I saw a guy at the UKSCA speaker, Avery Fagenbaum, and he flicked up a picture of an amazing kids play park, and his big thing is around getting kids and youth development of bringing back athleticism, bringing back basic fundamental movement skills and movement literacy in schools. So actually we're working with this youth population and junior population. It's not all about top end, because obviously we know if we build the youth at the top end, it's going to get better anyway. But he flicked up this great picture of a play park, and he goes, if we built that in your neighbourhood, will the kids come and play? And everyone was like, yeah, it's amazing, what a great play park, to a room full of S&C coaches who would flipping like to go themselves.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, the kids won't come because they're not strong enough to use it. And it's monkey bars, and it's stuff to swing on and climb on. And he's just like, kids are not that physically able anymore.
Wow. And
then they contrast that with pictures of sort of high school, like gym classes or PE classes, physical education classes back in the day, and they're doing calisthenics, they're climbing ropes, they're swinging, like it looks like gladiators, like hang tough, but we don't do that sort of stuff anymore. And we would look at that and go, hang tough, like swinging from one ring to the next. And we were like, that is single arm active hang, and it's the primary movement that we use in shoulder stability. Yeah. Like now, we don't
exactly
touch that sort of stuff.
That is essentially so bodyweight training or the law of body basics. If I can open the world's fittest book, and sorry for those listening on the podcast, I'll try my very best to kind of sort of paint a picture as you're listening. But if you imagine a pyramid of priority, so this goes back to your body's user guide, so how you can systematically program your body. And at the very base of this is the law of body basics, which is just calisthenics, bodyweight training. So it goes back to a Soviet Union sporting principle. So one of the greatest sporting nations is obviously possibly using pharmaceutical ergogenic aids. So moving on. But worth noting is a lot of their principles that they were pioneering. So the depth jump, Verkhoshansky, one of the creator of plyometrics as we know it today, ballistic training, speed training, he came up with the depth jump, and it was very simply, if you were to perform a box jump and you were to jump onto the box, he found out that by jumping from another box, so you land, store that kinetic energy, eccentric contraction in the legs will then produce a more powerful concentric contraction, so you'll be able to jump higher afterwards. He was the one who actually pioneered that, and this was during a time when some of the world's best athletes were touching their toes and swinging their arms and doing jumping jacks, and everyone was looking at these guys jumping off boxes going, what are the Soviet guys doing? Look at them. And they were jumping further, running faster than anyone else. So sorry, to come back to that, so mechanical energy, I state that the law of body basics forms the absolute base of this pyramid if you want to systematically condition your body. How do you become a better physical human? And all that is just, before you specialise in any sport, it doesn't matter if you are an expert, a beginner, male, female, it doesn't matter. You have to understand how to use your body, because it's this mechanical energy, and it goes back to this Soviet principle of general physical preparedness. So, like I said, at the very base of the pyramid, if we were here, I was a Soviet Union coach, and I had a young Jacko and a young Tim, before me, 5 years old, and your parents handed them, to me and said, train them to be future Olympians. And I'd be like, look, I don't know if he's, Jacko's going to be big or small, or Tim's going to be like quick or good at endurance. So what I'm going to do is teach them body basics, calisthenics, bodyweight conditioning, general physical preparedness. Doesn't matter what term, it's the same thing. I'm going to teach them to run, jump, crawl, pull-ups, press-ups, squat, hit a full lunge, because they'll then develop this proprioception, kinesthetic awareness. They'll understand how to use and move their body to then lay a neurological foundation to specialise later, when we know that Jacko's going to be a beast, and it's like, okay, he's becoming quite big, okay, send him into rugby, Tim, he's going to be an amazing swimmer, whatever he's going to be, then we can specialise. But we can only specialise once they've developed, as I said, mechanical energy, proprioception, kinesthetic awareness, general physical preparedness. It doesn't matter what you want to call it, it is the law of body basics. And that's what we stress in the book, that you have to start with that. And I think now, you were touching upon, even looking at, kids nowadays.
Yeah, I don't want to be that like, oh, it's better when we were younger, because it's different. I just think that I look back and, like, the old school gyms, when I was at infant school even, like, we had a rope and we had like the wall bars, and you would get on them and you would climb up them, and I think there's just a certain amount of, you see videos of it, of like high school PE and gym class, and it was just general, like I said, it's general preparation training, and they were like swinging on climbing ropes, and how many people can climb a rope these days? Like, it's not easy. And they were doing that, swinging from one ring to another, and we would start that as like, well, that's the foundation of our human flag training, is actually be able to single arm active hang, and that's this foundations of scapular retraction, depression, and shoulder stability, and being able to do that. And there's some really interesting thing about what happens when you're gripping, how that interacts with the shoulder. We're going back to these basics of their natural human movement patterns, but they're incorporated in exercise, and I just think that says a lot for just building that foundation level. Whereas now, I don't know a huge amount of what happens in PE at infant school, apart from what I hear, that actually probably not a huge amount of time dedicated towards it. But it's more games based, but I think we've probably lost the strength component of it. And play parks are now safe, aren't they? Because they want people to fall off stuff.
So we did just play, and I don't know whether there is less of that now for various different reasons, but we'd go out all evening and come back for tea, and that was, you do whatever you want, and a lot of that would be messing about and playing about. And where the kids now do or don't have the opportunity to do that. I remember we were in a queue to get on the ferry last year. I was driving we had a retreat in Moorseed, and I had to drive to take all the equipment, and we sat in the queue for the ferry, and like everyone had been bored out, and the kids are climbing the walls in the cars, and then a few of us would get out of the car, and then actually there was a family that had a few kids, that there was just like a big bar across the road at like hip high, and they were skinning the cat. They didn't know they were skinning the cat, they were just playing, they were trying to do a muscle up on it, they were getting like that, they were just automatically, I was looking at the cat and said, Catherine, doing calisthenics. Like, I wanted to go and talk, I wanted to go and coach them and train them, and it was like, no, just let them explore and play. I'm like, no, she's not quite doing it right. Like, do you know what I mean? But actually, just let them play and explore. They're having fun. And I think just giving people the opportunity to do that rather than, I guess, taking that opportunity.
That is it. And in many ways, it happened by accident. And with the world's fittest book, it's just taking sometimes what happened by accident, but making you very aware of it.
And they were having fun. They were smiling, they were enjoying, they were laughing. Like,
and that's a great point.
There's no one went, 5 more reps. Slower on the eccentric.
It's such a good point.
Until I stepped in.
But it is looking even at adherence. So actual, sort of, and this is, for everything that you can put down in theory, what happens in real life is sometimes very different. And genuinely, I'm not just saying it, but that's what I love about what you guys do, in that, because it is the School of Calisthenics, but you teach people the principles so they're able to actually then go forth. And if something happens like, You know, they've got to take the kids to school and that messes with their program and they didn't manage to do the workout that day. It's fine because they understand the principles. They can just rewrite the method and rewrite the workout plan and it's fine. It will still go on. But it's those people and you know, Ralph Waldo Emerson, if you only understand principles, you will come unstuck. And so those people who go, oh God, you know, I missed today's, you know, School of Calisthenics, you know, the human flag guide. I missed one day. What do? Do I start on day one? And it's just like, don't panic. I understand. And genuinely, that's what I love about your guides. You know, once you've read it, you're equipped. You know, so what you do with it is up to you, and you can modify it. You know, and that's what's so nice.
I think when you're just touching on adherence, like enjoying what you do, like we all just laugh there when we like when you're laughing, when you're smiling, when you're enjoying the things that you do, like everything else becomes easier. Adherence to it, your motivation to it. Like I don't know how much of it you sort of touch on that within the book, but if you enjoy what you're doing, you're gonna be so much more successful or happy at the end of it.
I think one of my things I can take away from today is that there's an opportunity there to start to, yes, we can specialise. We've taken the bodyweight basics to a more extreme level, and not that it's like extreme makes it sound like it's perilous.
Extreme, we need to extreme guy.
It's extreme because it's all we do. But what I think, and you're actually much better at this than me, but I also need to have some time and creating some space for the other things which I know that I enjoy when I get time to do them. Like, so it might be trying to get back into a bit of swimming because you know why I like swimming? Because it was hard and it pushed me to do something which actually made me feel really uncomfortable. But I knew that swimming was actually really complementary to my calisthenics because if my shoulders were getting tight and stiff, I could feel my stroke length decreasing, and actually getting into the water and driving out. It's almost like active stretching. If I'm not swimming at intensity, I'm just driving out nice distance per stroke, long stroke lengths. And I miss it, and I miss that hurt locker that you were talking about before, because when we train calisthenics, like, we're neurally quite challenged and we're mentally quite challenged because we have endless frustrations with trying to teach ourselves these different positions and moves and whatever else, and we hit the plateaus and you can find yourself in a real kind of frustration around it. But I miss that bit of being put through the mill like I did when I was playing rugby, and I don't create that for myself anymore. And I think that's something that I need to find some way of doing something that I enjoy, that I can adhere to. And it's that thing, like, I could go to the gym and I could do a class or something and I could hate it, but I'm sweating, but I can find that enjoyment in something that I enjoy, and then I'm gonna do it for longer. Because it's actually become something which I'm looking forward to doing that, and I know I'm gonna hurt, but I'm gonna feel great when I finish.
I think I've said it before to Harvey, the camera guy, that like how we train. This isn't any disrespect to how we train now compared to how I train for rugby, but I guess it's a bit different because someone else was pushing you because you're a coach and all that sort of thing, and you were paid to do it. I used to train so much harder than I do now. And like, I'm not now saying this isn't BS, I'm not saying it because Ross is sat here with me, but it's literally the conversations today have challenged me exactly the same to go like, am I mentally like telling myself like, oh, you can't do too much, and am I holding myself back? I'm going to challenge. I am going to challenge. I'm the type of guy that I'll do this now for 2 days, and then I'll forget about it. But I'm going to try and carry it on a bit longer. But I'm training tomorrow morning, and I'm going to have a few beats to a session.
I'm coming with you.
I'm going to train now. Harvey's coming. I'm just going to get.
It's so true. This I find something like
tag you in.
Like an air bike or intervals, and you know when you think, oh my god, my lungs are on fire, but honestly, in that moment, like everybody listening, when you are absolutely on fire, because a few people, when I was, on that 100-kilometre swim, which was only meant to be 40 kilometres, and there was a moment when I was getting stung by jellyfish. I was still pulling a 100-pound tree, I was cramping up, like the sun was beating down on me, it was in the Caribbean, and I simply just asked myself repeatedly, like kilometre after kilometre, and it's, not to sound morbid, but I was like, what's hurting? Honestly, Ross, I know, it's hurting, but what is actually hurting? I was like, my shoulders are sore, I'm pretty badly sunburned. And I'm like, okay, cool, be honest with yourself. But is there anything stopping you swimming 100 metres more? No, it's just a bit unpleasant. Then swim 100 more. And sometimes it was actually like going like, and I know this sounds a bit morbid, but like, are you dying? And my answer would always be like, no, I don't think I'm dying. It's like, keep going then, what are you doing?
Because you know at some point that hurt's going to end, right?
Exactly.
There's one thing
Unless you didn't get to the end, you died.
Oh well. More for me.
One of my favourite tennis players is Rafael Nadal, because he just gets in a dogfight and he's like, Federer is so graceful, he makes it look like, tennis, I shall beat you. Nadal comes out, he's passionate and he's firing, and I love it. But I've read a report from him before that he approaches games when he was in his peak. He's like, all I've got to do is outlast you. Like, the pain's going to stop, the discomfort is going to stop. I just need to last longer than you can.
Yeah.
And it's a real simple principle. But the other thing that I watched and read the book Touching the Void quite a few years ago. This guy, like mountaineering story, I think the guys were on K2, I think it was. I might be wrong with that. Actually, my son was somewhere in South America, but he ended up falling into a crevasse. His mate cut the line, he dropped down and he crawled in a crevasse and he couldn't get, or broken legs, couldn't get out, so he just was like sat there for a day or so, then I might as well go down into the abyss. So he just started, I'm going to die anyway. So he starts going down into this crevasse and he actually sees a piece of light that comes through the snow, he crawls out and he's got 2 broken legs pretty much, and he drags himself down this mountain to survival. And he's literally like, he would set a thing about a rock in front of him and he would crawl by his fingertips, 2 broken legs, like in a really bad way, but he pulled himself off the mountain. And you're like, actually, and you wind that back and it made me think before that you're going, it's almost that thing, those are the extreme examples, but I remember doing like bleep tests and fitness tests when we were training. You drop out and literally 30 seconds afterwards, I could have done more than that.
Yeah.
You know it.
Yeah. 100%.
And you're disappointed because you've now lost that opportunity to go and do that little bit
You're
more.
Right. They are extreme examples, but it will happen daily.
Yeah.
The amount of times, shall I get out of bed right now? Yeah, get out of bed. What's stopping you? You know, do a workout.
Yeah.
You know, you call them hammer intervals in that, like imagine an air bike or hill sprints, where you'll wait until the final one and then you'll push hard and then you'll finish. Whereas hammer intervals, and this is one thing the Royal Marine PTIs do better than anyone, is just in the middle of it, they'll just go now, go hard. Unquestionably, go hard. And you will, but then and then they'll go, right, and now you've got 5 more.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, oh man, I thought that was the last one. It's
There's
like,
some science around that, but actually setting athletes up and going, it's 5 reps.
Yeah.
And you go, alright, okay, cool, I'm going to do 5 reps. And then you see what can you do when you add 5 more.
Yeah.
And there was actually some research around athletes with cerebral palsy, and
That was
stuck into that.
So there's so many times you can do that as a coach.
Yeah, before you
We're going to do 5, we're going to do 5. Oh yeah, right.
There's also one where they put plastic bags on the weights of a barbell, so you don't know what weight it is.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to draw this to a close. This conversation, unfortunately for you guys listening,
I've
have you got
got
one more question? Oh yeah.
final question. I've got a real question.
I can smell the ribs. We need to eat.
I can do that mental thing, pushing when I'm running, like CV. So like I do like the park run 5k, and I have that same conversation with myself as I'm going. Can you not go a bit faster than this, Jacko? Like exactly like what's hurting compared, and all that. I find it much more difficult though if it's like a pull-up session or maxing dips or whatever. And is there anything that you found like trying to get into that place from when it's strength compared to when it's more cardio?
I mean with cardio and stuff, so when you look at strength is your body's ability to generate force. So quite often, if you're absolutely wired, that is at capacity. Yes, granted there are stories of, mums lifting cars off their kids' tracks, and so there is that potential that we're not locking into. So for that, it just comes from, smelling salts, your friend slapping you on your back, Jacko, still not forgiving you. But there is that, but it's a very different mindset to endurance, and I think that's one thing with all of the best ultramarathon runners I've ever met. They're not getting wired. They're not on the start line on smelling salts because they're like, wow, this is going to take 18 hours. So it is very, very different. However, if you're training for, muscular hypertrophy and you're using metabolic stress where it is a horrible, disgusting drop set, ask yourself afterwards. And if you could do another set after that one, that wasn't hard enough.
I think there's something in calisthenics I was thinking about actually after we left the session today. And sometimes we have like a pull-up set. doing one more rep or two more reps is actually harder. If I'm at fatigue or I'm really failing, got lactic acid build up, like you're just not functioning, and actually trying to do another rep of the same thing is actually almost impossible because you're not strong enough. I've maxed out. But then the example we did today, we're going to handstand push-ups, feet elevated push-ups into push-ups on the floor, into push-ups on knees. There was 4 different progressions there, with each you could move from one to the next. And one thing I think with the pulling sessions, when you're trying to create overload and stress like that, you've got to plan your session a little bit more. So actually, you can go pull-ups, but the band's already ready, and I'm going to drop down from the band from body weight, and I'm going to go to the band. And it might then be that I go horizontal row. But having that structure to your plan and going, actually, this is how I'm going to move through, and I've created the conditions. I love the Oscar Wilde quote of success is science. If you create the conditions, you get the result. And you then go, actually, I've created the conditions, I've now facilitated that, rather than jumping down from a pull-up and going, it's a bit hard, I don't know if I can do it anymore. Might just have my 2-minute rest period, which is often what I do.
It is, or goes back to the law of progressive overload. Doesn't matter, is it a pull-up, is it not? Can I apply more stress to this situation? Less rest, more weight, eccentric contraction, anything. Can I apply more stress? And sometimes for me, with swimming at the moment, I'm like, I'm going to do 10k today, I'm going to do 20k today. Can I apply more stress? And
get a tree.
So a tree resistance, or like the other day in Glasgow, swimming in 2-degree water, it was chilly. That was the stress.
What does everyone else in the pool that David Lloyd say when you walk in with the tree?
It's more the picnic of food at the end. I'm just like, no, it's just an eating competition with a bit of swimming.
Well, I think, Jacko, what we can take away from today is that we can hold ourselves, when we train together, accountable for maybe dropping in a session, because we've got some quite specific goals that require some quite specific.
There should be one session.
We should do one session where we just do a blitz.
Let's say it's tomorrow morning.
That would be amazing.
Tomorrow morning.
I'll try
this is now live, is it? But we'll talk on the live about tomorrow morning. A bit of what I like is what is it like? What's the word I'm looking for? When you're like accountability.
Yes.
So I'm going to say it tonight live on IG. It's going to happen.
Yes.
Like if you make me do my demonstrations at a workshop and everyone's watching, is so much better than if I was just training on my own.
If you take the shirt off.
Just the expectation of like, you better do this right. It might not. In my head, it's just what I'm telling myself in my head. Anyway, did you get a discount from or your money back from Thompson Holidays when you didn't reach the beat?
I didn't!
He's package company.
I'm still looking for the beach, I swear they do.
We normally finish our podcast by asking our guests what their current impossible is, but I think with Ross it's almost a wasted question. Unless there is something
Nothing's impossible for Ross.
I know, is there anything that you particularly look at and you go, do you know what, that's a stretch?
He couldn't be as skinny as us.
That's impossible.
Yeah.
4 ribs.
I sometimes think that I've got stuff in my impossible box, but I look at it and go, well, it's only there temporary. Nothing's firmly rooted there anymore, but it's just something I can't do. So if I try and do a single arm pull up at the moment, it's impossible. But all I need to do is put a bit of time and I'm going to move that out. So is there anything that you currently look at and you go, actually, these are big, audacious, horrible, nasty thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
It looks like it's impossible, but I'm going to start the process using a great book such as your own to guide you to the goal.
Yeah, no. So there is actually something.
Has this been discussed? Is this an exclusive?
Well, so I'm not allowed to say it yet.
But this thing.
No, but I'm going to actually chat to you guys off air because I actually need your advice on this. So genuinely, I can't say it, but you will be. Well, you will be the first to know about it, but you'll also be the first to broadcast it because genuinely, I want to do some really cool stuff. And I'm not just saying it, but I think a lot of. I don't know. I'm talking very cryptic, but basically a lot of stuff that you've spoke about and what you are actually genuinely pioneering at the moment in terms of shoulder mobility, strength, prehab, and everything like that. I am going to need in sort of bucket loads and stuff. So yeah, off air we'll talk, but on air you will be the first to know what my impossible is.
Well, I think I know it is actually you being able to stand against the wall with your back flat.
I can dream.
What's the shoulder mobility? There's something there. Jacko and I can beat him at shoulder mobility. That's how we see it.
It's bad.
Right, you also know how to wrap this up, don't you?
The sign off.
I do.
Class dismissed. We're gonna. You as the guest get to finish this off.
So thanks for joining us, guys. It's been a longer course for us, but we don't get the opportunity to pick a guy's brain like Ross on an everyday occasion. Jack and I would ramble on forever, but having somebody here, we wanted to give you a little bit more value. So on that note, Jack, have you anything to add?
Well, just if you are interested in finding out where you can find Ross, if you don't follow him on social or you don't. You haven't seen his book yet, all the links will be in the description, obviously. So make sure you check him out and give him a follow.
So until next time.
Class dismissed.